In our last video, we described the horoscope as a space-time structure consisting of three components: a fixed disk of the houses overlaid with a moving band of the signs and a moving band of the planets. At the moment of birth, the signs and planets take up positions in the houses, which reflect the quality of the time of birth that is imprinted on the newborn child as he takes his first breath. Remember Jung's important maxim: whatever is born or done this moment of time has the qualities of this moment of time. In astrology, we determine the qualities of the moment from the unique pattern of the heavens at that time. The birth chart shows the innate disposition and characteristics of the individual. We go further and say that encapsulated in the moment of birth is the potential unfoldment of the person. Symbolized in the horoscope are factors which predispose but do not predetermine a particular line of development and experience during the course of the life that has just begun. Let us apply an analogy which can deepen our understanding of this difficult concept. The horoscope may be likened to an acorn, which contains within itself the potential of becoming an oak tree. We have no difficulty in conceiving the prospects that lie ahead of this and a billion other acorns. Finding suitable embedment, the acorn sends out its shoots, and the two leaves of its dicotyledonous structure. Firmly rooted, the young sapling grows apace. In 3 or 4 years, it has become the well-rooted tree. Another 10 years, and we have the sturdy oak found all over Europe. It provides food and shelter for animals. Its wood, in earlier days, because of its stoutness, was a companion to the ships of the ocean-going mariner of yesterday. The tree survives many storms as it grows into maturity and old age. Strong winds and gales begin to crop it of its outer branches, and forest fires or the woodcutter eventually brings it tumbling down in extreme old age. Encapsulated in this curriculum vitae is a story of life played out in spatial dimensions and governed by time. It's not so difficult to see the whole process in one glance. A 4-dimensional ellipsoid captured in the sacred square inch between the brows during an extended moment of perception. The oak tree has a quantum past, a present and a future, and the capacity to observe its totality lies within the consciousness of the observer. We can apply the same concept to the structure of the horoscope. Information about the native's unfoldment is encoded in the birth chart like a blueprint. It contains the whole cycle of his birth, life, and death, just as the acorn held the formulae of the life of the oak tree that lay ahead. It is the astrologer's capacity to observe a holistic view of the horoscope that enables him to accurately reveal the present and future trends of the native. The natal chart as a whole represents the multidimensional potential of the life. To understand the whole, we must first analyze the parts. Each planetary position by sign and house reflects a dimension of experience or an aspect of the individual's totality. These three factors of a planet in a sign and in a house we therefore term an aspect. We can begin to extract the aspects from our example horoscope quite simply by locating the sign and house positions of the planets. You will note that where the sign on the proximal cusp of the house is different from the sign containing the planet, we include it in our aspect. Moving around the chart, we can now read off the 12 basic planetary aspects. Saturn in Cancer in the first house with Gemini on the cusp. Pluto in Libra in the fourth house with Virgo on the cusp. Uranus in Libra in the fifth house. Mercury in Scorpio in the fifth house with Libra on the cusp. Vulcan in Scorpio in the fifth house with Libra on the cusp. Neptune in Sagittarius in the sixth house with Scorpio on the cusp. The Sun in Sagittarius in the sixth house with Scorpio on the cusp. Venus in Capricorn in the eighth house. Jupiter in Aquarius in the eighth house with Capricorn on the cusp. The Moon in Pisces in the ninth house with Aquarius on the cusp. Mars in Aries in the 11th house. And Earth in Gemini in the 12th house with Taurus on the cusp. You now see why it is important to learn the glyphs by heart. Glyphs provide us with an astrological shorthand for writing and communicating information from the horoscope. Now that we have extracted the basic components of the chart, let us begin to interpret their meanings, starting with the Sun, one of the most important influences. As we have already noted, the Sun in this horoscope is in the sign of Sagittarius, in the sixth house, and Scorpio is on the cusp. Each of these glyphs represent basic principles in astrology, which can have a variety of meanings. What does the Sun mean in the horoscope? The Sun is the creative life force and radiates an aura of confidence. It gives a sense of identity, an ego, and it stands for the personal or lower self rather than the soul or higher self, which is represented by the rising sign. The Sun therefore expresses the personality of an individual, and he will radiate some, if not all, of the characteristics of his Sun sign. With the Sun in Sagittarius, the personality is characterized by an outreaching enthusiasm and a spirit of adventure. He will aspire to things beyond himself and will seek ways of extending his horizons through travel or intellectual and spiritual pursuits. Just as the Sun throws its rays on the whole of the solar system, the Sun in the horoscope plays an overall central role. But there will be one house in which it will be specially emphasized. The house position of the Sun will show the area of the life where the self-expression is focused. With the Sun in the sixth house, this individual will find a sense of personal identity and fulfillment through some sort of service to others. He takes pride in his work and his life energies are centered in the practicalities of the daily routine. He may also be interested in health matters, hygiene, and methods of self-improvement. We now blend these three factors of planet, sign, and house together to make a simple interpretation. Shines in locating his life in medicine. As part of our school's unique learning techniques, we break up the aspect into its component glyphs and place them over the interpretation. This is termed parsing. In parsing, we allocate an appropriate astrological structure to the words of a phrase or a sentence. We parse the interpretation to check its accuracy. The Sun in Sagittarius in the 6th house creates an adventurous individual who seeks to experience the meaning of life through work and through service to others. He desires to give a practical expression to his aspirations, and he strives for perfection in what he does. Medicine, science, and higher education are suitable occupations. But if his work is intellectually or spiritually unfulfilling, it may lead to delinquency in the workplace, and he will want to move on, seeking new directions for his labor. He may seek distinction working abroad. His spiritual goals will also be furthered through purifying disciplines like celibacy, mental hygiene, and healthy living. The Sun also rules those things in your life that you like, that you have an affinity for, that are sought after by your personality, that are you. With the Sun in Sagittarius in the 6th house, he likes to hunt the deer, or he likes hot baths. If we now add Scorpio on the cusp of the 6th house, the interpretation is subtly changed. He likes to hunt the deer for their venison, or he likes steamy hot baths, or, to put it in the appropriate language of the day, he likes the sauna. In parsing this permutation, we have allocated 3 glyphs, Sagittarius, the 6th house, and Scorpio, to the word sauna, because it contains these 3 qualities of a hot, steamy bath. We can vary the wording again and derive a psychological interpretation of the aspect. He gets all steamed up over hygiene. And here, a spiritual expression. He surrounds and absorbs himself intensely in his aspirations. It is inevitable in parsing that the language becomes clumsy. But at this stage, meaning, which is the goal of interpretation, is important. These are but a few of the many interpretations of this particular aspect, all of which add to our understanding of the personality. We call them permutations in basic symbols. Each glyph in astrology is associated with a range of key words or basic symbols. For instance, the words bath, hygiene, and absorb are all basic symbols for the 6th house. Hot hunt, and aspiration are key words for Sagittarius, and the words like, life, and surround are basic symbols for the sun. These are some of the many words that could be applied here. By permuting basic symbols of the glyphs in an aspect, we derive a wide variety of meanings encompassing the same aspect. The sun in the natal chart represents the personality in its self-expressive, creative, active, and masculine capacity. The moon, however, symbolizes the receptive, responsive, passive, and feminine side. The sun stands for self-motivated activity, but the moon shows how the person responds and adapts to the changes which impinge upon him in daily life. In our sample chart, the moon is in Pisces in the 9th house, with Aquarius on the cusp. The moon in the watery sign of Pisces has a great sensitivity. Feelings run deep, and there is receptivity to emotions and atmospheres, and to what constitutes the unknown. The person with this placing may be overly impressionable and withdraw into seclusion when conditions are stressful. At best, he reacts to the suffering of others with an empathy and an idealism which can border on the saintly. He is in tune with the deep unconscious, and the 9th house could elevate this receptivity to higher or superconscious states. We can encapsulate these insights and others in a series of permutations. Responds by going into distant, monastic seclusion. Responds by seeking the hidden meaning. Receptive to the unconscious and higher mind. An elder brother serves mankind with esoteric knowledge. On a more mundane level, we have illness hospitalizes him regularly, traveling abroad. Serves baked fish to a friend at lunch, where lunch is served between noon and 2 p.m. in the 9th house. Let us look at another aspect from the horoscope. Mercury in Scorpio in the 5th house, with Libra on the cusp. Mercury is the planet of the mind, of thought processes, and of the ability to communicate, lead, and initiate ideas. Mercury in Scorpio indicates an incisive and sharp-witted individual with an aptitude for making plans, dealing with habits, and surmounting obstacles. He may, however, be swayed by strong emotions and entertain vindictive thoughts. His probing and perceptive mind penetrates beneath the surface of things, and his curiosity about the hidden forces of nature, which are the cause of objective manifestation, leads him to an interest in the occult. Mercury in the 5th house indicates intellectual interests of a creative and self-expressive nature, especially in show business and spectaculars like Oklahoma and Showboat. Mercury in this position signifies an individual who likes to concentrate on his own creative projects for which he wishes to be admired, As the dictionary points out, there may be intellectual egoism and conceit. At a mundane level, he will enjoy competitive games of mental strategy and skill, like chess. And with this placing, he may be overly preoccupied with romantic and sexual affairs. He also has the potential of a team leader, able to stimulate the enthusiasm of those around him. We can clarify the meaning of this aspect with some permutations from the dictionary. Plans everything around himself. Self-esteem has gone up to his head. Bantam cock, which is a symbol of either pluckiness or priggishness. Sometimes a single word or phrase can encapsulate the whole meaning of the aspect. We term it a compound complexity. A compound complexity cannot, of course, be broken down and parsed as separate components. Another example is cockfight. Then there is the king plans a comeback. Or, to use a monarchist slogan in Italy, Il Re, restore the king, where Libra, the sign on the cusp of the fifth house, rules Italy. If you consider the presence of Vulcan, which is always conjunct to Mercury in the horoscope, then stands up to a ring of bullies. You might ask, of what relevance to this person are images such as a fighting cock and a king planning a comeback? They are symbols of psychological and spiritual processes. As we saw at the beginning of this tape, the horoscope does not represent a static condition, but a dynamic unfolding of a person's life and consciousness. And this is especially true in esoteric astrology, which is meant for people who are undergoing a transformation and reorientation to their higher self. There are inevitable periods of crisis as old habits and ways die out and are replaced by new ones. This is why Scorpio, the sign of regeneration, rules the occult path. But old elements of the personality resist change, and a struggle for their survival ensues. A cock on a dunghill is a good symbol for the egoistic individual who heaps upon himself an exalted self-esteem which is not his by right. It is the symbol of vanity, and he who crows about himself. To restore the king means to give the crown of consciousness back to the soul. The soul-infused personality then assumes its proper role as the king's emissary in the world. Another compound complexity is cockpit. And if we include Vulcan, the aspect becomes the cockpit of Europe, Vulcan being the ruler of Europe. Belgium was seen as the cockpit of Europe because so many battles were fought there. Many places and people themselves become virtual cockpits in their lives. Afghanistan, surrounded by very hostile borders, has become a contemporary cockpit among nations today. Amongst businessmen, and during his life, Robert Maxwell was the embodiment of this theme. He won the Military Cross in the Second World War for valor, was the center of hostile takeover battles in the City of London, and ended his life in suicide. I'm sure you can recall at least one such person in your own life. We now begin to see the function of symbols in esoteric astrology. By introducing the innovative method of permutations in basic symbols, we are able to take chart interpretation beyond orthodox procedures. Symbols amplify the meaning of an aspect and enable us to elevate its interpretation to the level of the higher mind. A symbol is something that stands for something else. For example, a white feather stands for cowardice in time of war, but a feather in the cap or the hat in peacetime is a symbol of attainment. Myths and legends are useful descriptive tools as well. They play a supportive role in interpretation. A myth appropriate to the aspect Mercury and Scorpio in the 5th house is the lion and the unicorn. The lion is the symbol of man's personality that is engaged in mortal combat with the soul, symbolized by the unicorn. This demonstrates the fight in man for the prize of consciousness. In the royal coat of arms of Britain, both creatures are struggling for the crown, which is the symbol of man's consciousness. Expressing this in a permutation, a fight for the crown of consciousness. In the old rhyme, the lion and the unicorn were fighting for the crown. The lion beat the unicorn all round the town. This is so true of man in the world today. His personality dominates his consciousness, and the voice of the unicorn is hardly heard. The 5th house, of course, is the house of the sun and Leo, and favors the personality. However, there is an esoteric version of another verse which says that in a further combat, the lion's heart is pierced by the horn of the unicorn, a reference to the final victory of soul-infused consciousness in the disciple. To explore the theme of conflict and combat further, we can look to the 8th house of the horoscope. The 8th house is the natural home of Mars and Scorpio, the planet and sign of war, struggle, and strife. We find, however, beneficent Jupiter, the planet of optimism and good luck, placed here, in the sign of Aquarius, which is its own zodiacal sign, promising a fortunate outcome to this person's 8th house ordeals. Jupiter indicates the capacity for expansiveness, and hence the ability to relate socially to friends and groups. Wherever Jupiter is placed in the horoscope, there will be expansion and growth, which takes the individual beyond his personal sphere of activity or ring pass knot. When afflicted in the 8th house, it exacerbates one's troubles or leads to sexual excess. But when it is well aspected, as it is in this chart, Jupiter brings a broader context to the crises and transitions of the 8th house, and they are understood as opportunities for change and spiritual growth. The qualities of Aquarius are particularly those of the human race, and it has been called the sign of man. Here it has a humanizing and civilizing influence on the 8th house, whose natural tendencies veer towards the animal instincts in man. The potential exists here of transcending mere personal conflicts and instead struggling for social reform and fighting for causes which uplift humanity, especially via a group. On a purely material level, there will be expansion through other people's money. This person could be the recipient of windfalls through inheritance, or, as the dictionary tells us, he could frequently be successful at betting on the outcome of an issue. Alternatively, he may share in the resources of a group, resources that are used for a common purpose. Jupiter expands our participation in the life of the Leviathan, the greater being in which we live and move and have our being, through a wider range of relationships and the community spirit. In the dictionary, we symbolize this aspect as a massive troopship carrying military personnel, and even more effectively in a convoy, where there is strength in numbers. This horoscope could be that also of a huge world organization, of a nation or the earth itself. This individual is thus very much in tune with the spirit of the times and the changes that lie ahead of us all. Jupiter, in the air sign of Aquarius, will bring an expansion of knowledge, a quest for truth and spiritual enlightenment, for which mankind thirsts. And in the 8th house, it will be occult knowledge, a new age rebirth of ancient wisdom, astrology, karmic laws, life after death, reincarnation, and astral projection. Jupiter stands for human dignity, and is especially dignified in its own sign of Aquarius, which amplifies the expansive vibrations of the planet. As a conveyor of the second ray of love wisdom, Jupiter widens the concept of unity to embrace a broader spectrum of humanity. With Jupiter in Aquarius, this individual will have many friends and group associations. There is a broad-mindedness and humanitarian tolerance of minorities, which engenders brotherhood among men. If ever there is to be an opportunity for the brotherhood of man to be restored, it will be in the next 2,000 years of the age of Aquarius, under the monitorship of Jupiter. Here is a series of permutations for the aspect of Jupiter in Aquarius in the 8th house. Frequently betting on the outcome of a series of obstacles to expansion. Many friends in an occult group. A troopship carrying military personnel, if we include Capricorn on the cusp. A set of successive issues of an industrial periodical. The crashing of a giant wave, or, as a compound complexity, tsunami. As you have seen in this video, the extraction and interpretation of aspects from the horoscope are fundamental to astrology, and yet very simple processes that anyone can grasp. We have only looked at 4 of the 12 aspects here. However, the same simple process of parsing can be used for all the basic aspects of planet, sign, and house, as well as for the most complex of combinations. You should now be able to practice making up parsable sentences based on the key words you have been given for the basic aspects from any chart, including your own. The Dictionary of Astrology, referred to several times during the course of this video, contains example interpretations for every aspect that can be found in any horoscope. It will prove to be immensely valuable to you as a guide and a second opinion throughout your astrological career.